Magical girls are selfless. They are the chosen warriors of light that put their lives on the line for greater good and emerge victorious from any battle. Magical girls are glorious. They are graceful and powerful and gifted an immense power because of their pure hearts. Magical girls are perfect. Or are they? Madoka Magica is rightfully defined as a groundbreaking anime in the genre of magical girls, praised for its complex characters and deconstruction of the magical girl genre. This anime is rich in symbolism and the questions it raises regarding both the genre of anime and the society that the show reflects. Due to Madoka being a wolf in sheep's clothing, or a horror in the disguise of a cute girl anime, it deliberately lures the viewer into thinking this is yet another story about a group of girls given mystical powers by a cute animal sidekick to fight evil. And to be fair, all of those components are indeed present in the anime, but each is distorted to show the flaws of the magical girl system. In this video, I talk about how Magica franchise approaches the idea of selfishness and sacrifice by analyzing the characters of the Holy Quintet and their personal motivations to become magical girls. Firstly, let's think about what the opposite of selfishness, selflessness means in the context of magical girls. Magical girls subgenre about magical girl warriors is ultimately a superhero story, and like in any hero story, it includes some sacrifice of personal freedoms or pleasures for the sake of greater good. It is expected of a hero to put the needs of others above their own and be ready to put their life on the line. Sometimes it is more literal, where the hero makes an ultimate sacrifice and dies for the sake of others. Sometimes it is tamer, where the sacrifice includes losing social life or professional future in exchange for helping others. As an audience, we are meant to be sympathetic to those heroes and wish them to succeed, but also recognize that sacrifice is a crucial part of being a hero and it cannot be omitted. Enter Madoka Magica and its sacrificial warriors, magical girls. Those girls by definition have already made the greatest sacrifice, transformed their very being, their souls into the soul gems so that they would be granted power to fight witches that plague this world. On paper, this is a noble concept. Sad indeed, but noble. And familiar. But Madoka Magica destroys this preconception by introducing a very simple plot detail: the wishes. Magical girls of Madoka Magica, unlike many other magical girl warriors across the genre, are not given their powers because they are pure of heart or were chosen to protect those who are weak. No, the girls made their choice themselves and entered a contract, almost like a job agreement. Each wish is something worth risking your life for, as Kyubey explicitly states. It is true that Kyubey only tells what is necessary and hides the most crucial information from the girls, but the nature of the contract is simple. He grants you your wish, and you become a magical girl. So can it be argued that the heroines of Madoka Magica are selfish by definition, considering they enter the role of magical girls in exchange of having their wish granted? Yes and no. First, let's talk about the life of a magical girl in general. The girls with karmic destiny are targeted explicitly by Kyubey. The thing is, once you become a magical girl, there is no way back, and the characters know of it. Although Kyubey lies, he does not give the girls an impression that the process is reversible. Hunting witches becomes a duty one cannot omit, even without the knowledge that the darkening of your soul gem is a one-way ticket to becoming a witch. Many of the girls seem to realize that it is essential for them to keep their soul gem clean, or something horrible will happen. As is told by the original Madoka Magica anime, magical girls do not usually work in teams. An idea that was somewhat dispelled in Meiji Record, which features multiple instances of cooperation between the characters without the animosity of fighting for territory. In the original anime, however, girls often fight with each other for territory, seeing as there seem to not be enough witches and grief seeds for everyone. In the original anime, we get to see Mami, who represents, at least on the surface, the ideal magical girl who fights for the innocent and actually tries to save the victims of the witches. Despite familiars not dropping grief seeds, Mami fights them regardless, spending her magic. She is a notable exception and a mighty magical girl, as is stated in the anime. On the other hand, there is Kyoko, who approaches magical girls' duties with the utmost cynicism and, like a hunter, waits for the familiars to consume innocent people and become witches themselves. She farms grief seeds for her own benefit, not caring much for the people affected by witches. The thing that none of the girls realize, at least until the start of the events of the anime, is that none of them are hunters. They are prey to Kyubey, just of a different caliber than witches. Kyubey is a predator in both the literal and metaphorical sense of the word. Becoming a magical girl is already fighting a losing game, since Kyubey's target becomes part of the food chain. For magical girls, their whole existence is a fight for survival, where it's eat or be eaten. Even without the knowledge of them becoming witches, magical girls continue to purify their gems. The girls themselves may think that their soul gem becoming dark is the end of them one way or another. And once the realization sinks in, there seems to be no place for fooling around. Every day becomes another fight for survival, and the glamour of magical weapons and cute transformations doesn't attract anymore as it used before. It is little wonder that the cycle of life of a magical girl is so short. Under such an immense amount of stress, it is extremely easy to break. With such a way of living, it is a miracle there are magical girls like Mami at all, who are willing not only to protect the people unaware of the witches, but also help other magical girls, their potential competitors. After the first impression of heroism and glamour fades away, the disillusionment comes, and I can imagine that a lot more girls filled Sayaka's footsteps than Mami's. In such conditions, being selfless becomes almost impossible. As anime progresses, the facade of being a magical girl begins to crack. The idealized impression of a magical girl is contrasted with a harsh reality, and none embodies it like Mami Tomoe. Mami is the very first magical girl we meet, besides Homura, who acts as a mentor and a guide to Sayaka and Madoka. She is calm, collected, and powerful, but most importantly, she is righteous. Mami hunts both witches and familiars, and spends nearly all her time patrolling the city and protecting its citizens. She is an inspirational figure and easily makes Sayaka and Madoka become charmed with the lifestyle of a magical girl, because she makes it look so easy. Only in her final hour does Mami show what she has been hiding all this time, that she is incredibly lonely, and she is afraid. During her final monologue, Mami admits that this battle was the first one where she was so calm. And we, as an audience, finally see that Mami is not this idealized hero, but a lonely girl trying to survive and do her best. Loneliness is Mami's greatest pain, and she wants to escape it. That is one of the reasons she is okay with the idea of making Sayaka and Madoka magical girls. She mentors them and shows them the craft of fighting, not only to warn them about the dangers, but also to prepare them to survive. Madoka was lucky to see this vulnerable side of Mami, which deterred her from becoming a magical girl, at least for some time. What's interesting is that Mami knows how horrible and scary it is to be a magical girl. Unlike Madoka or Sayaka, she didn't have a luxury of choosing her wish. But Madoka and Sayaka do, and she knows it. And yes, she does give them a warning that being a magical girl isn't an easy life. Still, I argue that Mami glamorizes it for Sayaka and Madoka, even if just subconsciously. She performs impressive transformation. She engages in elegant fights, where she makes herself look composed and nonchalant, and concludes her fights with a flashy weapon attack. It is pretty evident that she tries hard to embody the mentoring figure, and after her initial warning, she acts pretty much as if Sayaka's and Madoka's decisions to become magical girls are already on the table. One could argue that since the girls were chosen by Kyubey, Mami couldn't do anything about it. Well, the truth is, as long as the wish isn't made, nothing is over yet. Mami, a veteran, absolutely knows that becoming a magical girl is almost always a death sentence. I refuse to believe she hasn't seen at least some girls lose their lives fighting witches. So wouldn't you say she has at least partial responsibility to warn Madoka and Sayaka about what happens to inexperienced and non-powerful magical girls? In the end, I say, Mami's wish to not be alone caused her to play a part in luring Madoka and Sayaka into becoming magical girls. She showcased glamour of heroism but neglected the horror of everyday survival. Maybe indirectly, but Mami is responsible for Sayaka's end. The nature of Sayaka's wish is an interesting one, seeing as she is one of the 2 Holy Quintet members who made a wish for someone else's sake together with Kyoko. And it is precisely Kyoko who challenges Sayaka to think whether her wish was truly selfless or if she made it to earn the love of a boy she loves herself. As a character, Sayaka is what I call a perfect magical girl type. She tends to be heroic and self-sacrificing, rushing into danger to save her friends. In a typical magical girl anime, those traits would be rewarded by her sacrificing something yet achieving her ultimate goal in the end. For instance, I believe that if Madoka Magica wasn't so subversive, Sayaka's decision to help Kyosuke with her wish would result in the boy reciprocating her feelings. Because Sayaka was virtuous and selfless. But was she? I think that out of all the members of the Holy Quintet, Sayaka becomes disillusioned with reality the most after she starts hunting witches after Mami's death. Unlike Madoka, she did not see Mami's moment of weakness. So for her, Mami will forever be this shining beacon of hope, an ideal magical girl with no fear. Sayaka is tormented by her inability to be just like Mami, to be perfect. Of course, none of it speaks of her selfishness or selflessness. Like many magical girls before her, she was forced into this trap from which there is no escape. Sayaka realizes she is no longer human and decides that she can't be with Kyosuke since she sees herself as some kind of monster. Eventually, the stress and hopelessness break her and she turns into a witch, a materialization of her pain. Sayaka has some bad reputation, with some people calling her a hypocrite for selfishly wishing Madoka to become a magical girl when it was her decision in the first place. And I do agree, but to some extent. It indeed was Sayaka's own decision to make a wish and become a magical girl. She indeed saw Mami's death with her own eyes and knew the risks. In the end, Kyosuke's life wasn't in danger, so it was not life or death decision on her part. Her wish was the sole reason Kyosuke achieved his dream, and that is true. In my opinion, some part of Sayaka hoped karma would work in her favor, making her and Kyosuke closer. It is obvious she is deeply in love with the boy and feels sadness because of his trauma. Sayaka herself agonizes over the nature of her wish later, trying to understand whether her decision to help Kyosuke was as selfless as she thought it was before. In truth, there was both selfishness and selflessness in Sayaka's decisions. Yes, she wanted Kyosuke to love her, but it ultimately wasn't the reason she made her wish. Sayaka was happy to see her friend's wish come true. And we can't forget that Sayaka wanted to save people of her city, growing concerned with the fate of the citizens now that Mami was gone. She fought both the witches and the familiars to an equal extent, only darkening her soul gem because of stress and inexperience, unlike Mami, who had the advantage of not knowing the true nature of magical girls. Perhaps Sayaka's character shines the brightest in her interactions with Kyoko. Kyoko, disillusioned with the nature of being a magical girl, actively tries to make Sayaka as self-serving as she is, but fails, as the blue-haired magical girl remains unmovable in her decision to sacrifice herself for others. Only once Sayaka reaches her breaking point and, as heavily implied, kills the guys on the subway, does she transform into a witch. In the end, she was just a kid faced with the burden of becoming a monster. What's interesting is that Sayaka tried to hold on to her principles until the very end, unlike the third character of this video, Kyoko. Kyoko is the last character to be analyzed in this video, as Madoka and Homura deserve their own discussion. Kyoko remains the most interesting character when discussing the selfishness of magical girls, partly because she acts as the most selfish one during the series. Kyoko actively goes out of her way to show that she does not care for either the civilians whom she sacrifices to familiars so that they can grow into witches, or her fellow magical girls, as is shown in her first interaction with Sayaka before they grew closer. Kyoko gets a lot of love for her sacrifice at the end of the series, so much so that her previous actions, I feel, sometimes get overlooked in favor of presenting her in a better light. Don't get me wrong, Kyoko is genuinely one of my favorite characters in this franchise, and I think that her complex morality is precisely what makes her such an interesting person. But she did sacrifice innocent people to farm grief seeds. A lot. She abuses the powers of being a magical girl and lives her life solely for her own benefit. She even goes as far as to suggest to Sayaka to hurt Kyosuke so that he stays dependent on her forever. She isn't above fighting for territory and generally seems to not care about others. But that is only on the surface. Kyoko made one of the most selfless wishes among the girls. The nature of her wish indeed forced people to listen to her father's sermons. But I doubt Kyoko thought of that when she formulated her wish. She asked people to listen, not blindly follow or join their church, just listen. Kyoko could have wished for her father to have power or influence, but she wanted people to hear him and make their own decisions. Of course, the nature of a wish makes the outcome hard to predict, so people became sort of hypnotized. Still, Kyoko's intentions, in my opinion, were pure at the very start. She did make a wish in a moment of desperation, true, but isn't that interesting that she didn't wish for her family to become rich so that they could afford to have food? No, Kyoko, just like Sayaka, wanted her father's dream to come true. And that is partly the reason Kyoko feels so connected to Sayaka and tries to make her see the truth that fighting for others only brings disappointment. I even think that Kyoko tried to save Sayaka from the inevitable pain that would come as a consequence of her wish. Only after being betrayed by her father and losing her family did Kyoko become the self-serving person we saw her in the anime. Still, I believe that much of her actions were only a facade to mask how hurt she truly was. After all, if you don't get close to anyone, if you forsake people around you, you don't have to feel pain when they are gone. Unlike Mami's, Kyoko's death leaves us with hope, as in her final moments, she is reborn again and thanks to Sayaka, regains the idealism that drove Kyoko to become a magical girl in the first place. I do not think she got redeemed because of her sacrifice, partly because Kyoko's life as a magical girl wasn't simply black or white and didn't require redemption in the first place. Even in her darkest moments, Kyoko finds it within herself to try and care for Sayaka, with Sayaka's death simply revealing what was hidden behind the facade of selfishness all along. The nature of a magical girl contract is inherently a selfish one, true. A wish in exchange for servitude. But is it fair to ask teenage girls to fully analyze the consequences of their actions? They are either the teenagers who lack the necessary life experience to weigh the price of their wish, like Sayaka, or desperate victims who have no choice but to make it, like Mami and Kyoko. In some instances, making a wish is a matter of life and death, and that is what Kyubey exploits. Teenage girls might be a valuable source of energy, but they are also exceptionally easy to manipulate. When you are a child, the promise of anything you desire for the price of gaining magical powers and fighting evil doesn't sound like such a bad prospect. Just as adults have the necessary experience to see the world in shades of grey, as disillusionment sets in while growing up. Teenagers lack this insight. For them, everything is pretty much black or white, and the guilt of not living up to their idealized expectations often pushes them to the edge, as seen in Sayaka's case. However, the world is not black and white, and Madoka Magica brilliantly illustrates it with its heroines. The selfless wish to cure somebody's illness might have a hint of a selfish desire to be loved by the person you cherish. Still, it doesn't diminish the importance of said wish. And is it really that selfish to wish for companionship in this day-to-day hell that is a magical girl's existence? Even Kyoko, who acts selfish for the majority of the anime, rediscovers her idealism after meeting Sayaka, which gives her the strength to fight for someone else again, not just herself. The show does not hold the girls innocent or guilty for making their wishes. It does not put the blame on teenagers exploited by a sociopathic alien. But Madoka Magica does hold these characters accountable. Once the wish is made, there is no going back. That is why Madoka's transformation into a goddess does not free the girls from their fate and does not destroy the soul gems. They do not die like normal people do. Instead, they rejoin Madokami in an endless sleep. It is undoubtedly better than an existence of endless suffering as a witch, but it is not the freedom the girls desire. You can be selfish and selfless. One does not exclude the other. Humans are given freedom, unlike gods or demons, who are trapped in their roles of hope and despair. And speaking of gods and demons, the next video on Madoka Magica will feature a deep analysis of Homura and her complicated feelings of self-hatred, obsession and love. I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you for staying till the end of the video. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.